Thank you, first of all, for your service on this commission, and welcome to Long Island. We are so happy that you're here. To our great county executive in Suffolk, thank you for being a fierce voice on Long Island to ensure that Long Island, with every measure, gets its fair share. And quite frankly, that's what we're here to talk about today, getting our fair share. I'm Rebecca Sanin. I'm the president and CEO of the Health and Welfare Council of Long Island. We are an umbrella organization. We work with hundreds of nonprofits across the region on every area of health and human services. We also partner with our county executives, our controllers, our local elected officials, our superintendents of schools. Just this morning, I was presenting to the Suffolk County Superintendents Association about the census for 2020. We work with our libraries. We work with all community partners. In partnering with our county executives, the Health and Welfare Council of Long Island has been leading this region in census preparation activities. As one of the first regions with two standing and fiercely active complete count committees, we are partnering with government, towns, villages, libraries, community-based organizations, and so importantly, our school districts to make sure that we get out the count. We know we need effective public-private partnerships to get an accurate count. This is why I am so proud of the work that we've already begun to accomplish on Long Island through the Nassau and Suffolk Complete Count Committees, where we've engaged nearly 300 active leaders from community-based organizations, government, labor, business, faith-based organizations, our 124, yes, we have 124 school districts on Long Island, the utility companies. We have every sector of Long Island coming together to build a campaign, a Get Out the Count campaign. And we have 12 subcommittees. We've actually had, I think, 26 subcommittee meetings in my office in the last 2 weeks, and I kid you not. And they represent communication experts, local government, faith-based communities of every kind, immigrant populations. Again, that word immigrant sometimes is thought of in a very singular way, and we have a diverse immigrant population on Long Island. People of color, business executives, senior citizen experts, early childhood leaders, and education leaders. And we have been out there raising awareness, I would say fiercely, holding press conferences, talking on national radio, meeting with associations, doing everything we can because the urgency is now. So to my friends in government on the commission, and many of you represent government, you know what it is to get out the vote. We have built an army of census ambassadors working together to get a complete count from Elmont to Montauk. The groundwork has been laid. The bones are in place. And now we need meat on those bones. You can't run a political campaign without resources, right? In fact, one of the first to-dos is in running a campaign is what? It's raising money. And we can't run a Get Out the Count campaign and deliver results without an appropriate infusion of resources. So we all know the Fiscal Policy Institute said New York needed $40 million to be effective. What did the state land? The state budget landed on $20 million, actually up to $20 million. We are committed to raising the dollars in that gap, but we need every single one of the $20 million not to be reappropriated, as we all know it can be, but to be laser-like focused on census activities. And I want to share a few of the challenges that we face here on Long Island. I think first and foremost in this census, the anti-immigrant climate with shifting immigration policies in Washington, D.C. is something we need to be concerned about in a way that we never have been before. I mentioned that we're an umbrella organization for the health and human services sector. We get calls every day of folks dropping off of WIC, dropping off of SNAP, dropping off of Medicaid. Over 1 million moms and babies in the last year have dropped off of WIC, the Nutritional Security Program for children 0 to 5. If people are giving up food for fear of scrutiny, for fear of deportation, for fear of dissolution, do we really think they're going to be excited to give the government information about where they live and who they are? No. Second challenge is money. The federal government has allocated less money this time around. The state government, we're very grateful for the dollars, but it's less than the need. And on Long Island, one of our big funders for census work in the past was Hagedorn Foundation, and those dollars are no longer here. Another challenge is the digital nature of this census. The first contact is going to be, as was said before, a card that says, here's your link, go online and fill out this census. That can create all sorts of challenges for folks, including just a barrier in saying, I don't want to go online and share my information in this universe in which people are hacked on a regular basis. And then on Long Island, we have a very sort of unique situation in the amount of unaffordable housing that we have. What that means, Vanessa talked about the LUCA process, and the county did a phenomenal job in identifying houses where people live, but if houses are unregistered, right, then they're not getting that contact from the Census Bureau. And what does that mean? Let's say I'm a landlord and I have 15 households in a single family home, because they're all over the place here on Long Island, and I get that census contact. Am I going to go online and count the 15 people that shouldn't live there? Absolutely not. And so we have a huge process in front of us to get people to self-select, to call the census and say, I live here and I want to be counted, in the midst of this time of such anti-immigrant rhetoric and fear. So we have a significant challenge ahead of us. And Title 13 does protect information from being shared with ICE and Homeland Security officials, but also with county and town governments, any entity. So landlords, we want to encourage landlords to know they don't need to fear, any kind of challenge to their permitting if they fill it out accurately. But we know that the challenge there is significant. Long Island, despite our significant complex poverty, people often like to say we have pockets of poverty. We really have pockets of wealth. And the challenges that we face, we are the flickering flame that continues to provide light to our state through our contributions to the rest of the state. We are a region filled with innovation, educational excellence, and recreational bliss. We need to ensure that this flame, that this light, the opportunity here isn't extinguished for any child or any family. And here's the thing about the challenges that we're facing at this moment in history. The truth is, we're living in a war zone. The war is not on Long Island or Rochester or Erie County. The war is between New York State and Washington, D.C. New York receives over $53 billion through 16 large federal assistance programs that are distributed based on the decennial census. We are talking about more than $33 billion in Medicaid and children's health insurance programs to provide basic health care to our families, and so much more for our schools, our roads, and our infrastructure. Do we want our communities to be healthy, educated, and safe? Because that is the question. If so, then we need every one of those up to $20 million in New York. In New York, we have 5.3 million people on Medicaid, a little under 700,000 children on the Children's Health Insurance Program. Some of you might have, seen the recent measles outbreak. Certainly, we don't want children not to have health insurance. And 2.7 million New Yorkers, many elderly, disabled, veterans, or children on SNAP. An undercount means less dollars for these programs. An undercount means New Yorkers most in need lose. And I could talk about Long Island and how we send more money to Albany than we get back, but that really wouldn't help me engage those of you who live north of the Thrax Neck Bridge. So I'm going to continue to talk about something that we all can get behind. New York State is under a vicious and devastating assault from policies that are eviscerating our way of life from Buffalo to Montauk. I'm talking about SALT. This attack on our economic stability as a state is having excruciating consequences. A second assault involves our shifting demographics. This shift on Long Island has been noticed in D.C. We've had over 10,000 unaccompanied children move to Long Island since 2014. And from visits to Long Island to mentions in national speeches, we have been targeted by the anti-immigrant rhetoric and sweeping generalizations about crime and gangs. It is critical that New York stand up for Long Island against these attacks. We need to stand together for who we are as New Yorkers, and we know who we are, and we will not allow our neighbors to be made invisible. And as government leaders, you know that we are effectively the purse strings for other states to be funded. And we are in the position at this moment of having to ask ourselves, do we want potholes filled in Texas, or do we want them filled on the Long Island Expressway? Do we want children to have health insurance in California or in Monroe County? Do we want our schools to be resourced in Long Island and Buffalo or perhaps New Jersey? And of course, I wish that every state has what it needs. But we can't sit idly by while the rhetoric in D.C. eviscerates the future of New York. New Yorkers won't stand for it. New York is one of 12 states where more than a 2% undercount could result in reduced representation in D.C. Can you honestly imagine New York being less represented in D.C. given what we see today? And for 10 years, census sets a precedent for 10 years of representation and 10 years of funding. So, what does that mean to you? The commission that is charged with recommendations on how to ensure a full and complete count. Here's what it means. Here's the passionate plea that I leave you with today. We all know that the governor, the assembly, and the Senate are committed to New York getting its fair share. There is no question about that. But we also know that the funding for census activity right now is precarious. Up to $20 million can mean a lot of things. And its current vessel is one that could allow for reappropriation. I can tell you as I stand here today that in New York City, a region with much more need, but also with much more integrated systems than Long Island. Imagine one school district, integrated government, public transportation, and the like. The mayor is investing in census from city dollars. And in fact, some of the city organizations are asking the mayor for a $40 million investment just for New York City. Whatever that investment turns out to be, we need you to factor it into your regional funding decisions. We need every dollar of that $20 million in the rest of state. And we need fair allocation. And we need to move. The sense of urgency couldn't be more clear. The prospect of an accurate 2020 count is challenging when New York is under assault. So we need to move, and we need to get the money to community organizations that are trusted and can do the work. Most simply cannot do it without funding, no matter how committed they are to the notion that every human being, every family, every school district, and every community counts. When you want to put out a flame, when you want to extinguish the light, you deprive it of its oxygen supply. Washington, D.C.'s efforts to ensure an undercount are akin to stopping New York's oxygen supply. The most basic needs that we have for food security, healthcare, disaster planning, roads, and infrastructure will be invisible without an accurate count. And what is perhaps most insidious is that the efforts to stymie an accurate count, this war zone between D.C. and New York that I referenced earlier, there aren't clear battlefields. The battle is constant. It's slow. And it's a progressing crisis that leaves those of us committed to our region left with one answer: build an army, build a groundswell in every corner, build a movement, because New Yorkers cannot be made invisible by these endless assaults on everything that we value. Fear nurtures an undercount. An undercount nurtures heightened segregation in a region that is already more segregated than most across the country. Segregation perpetuates separate and unequal opportunity. This in a time when our nation may be getting a deputy attorney general who won't respond to whether or not Brown v. Board of Education was decided correctly. This is real. This is war. The war is about protecting, honoring, and nurturing New York's family. The two complete count committees that you heard about today are committed to just this task. And I leave you with this. Martin Luther King once said, "Wait has almost always meant never." Well, we can't wait any longer, and never is not something we can embrace. Now is the time for choosing our path forward as one New York. Now is the time for ensuring that our state is not erased, made invisible, undercounted, underrepresented, or underfunded as policies in D.C. seek to do. Now is the time for New York to shine its light and claim its place in this very dark moment in history as the leader it has often been in times of crisis. And we need you to make that happen. You have the power to do so. So I thank you for your service.